Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Ushanka Show. Today we're going to talk about Soviet housing through the eyes of Robert Robinson, who wrote the book Black on Red: My 44 Years Inside the Soviet Union. This video is episode number 24 of my book review, Black on Red, and if you're new to my channel, I have a separate playlist where all those videos are located. And I just realized we're at chapter number 27, page 325. So this is already over 20 years in the Soviet Union for Robert Robertson, but he never really mentioned anything about Soviet housing. Sounds like he had his own little apartment, but now he's talking about interesting housing option called Коммунальная квартира, the communal apartment. So Robert Robertson became a friend with Comrade Abramovich, a Jewish engineer, and he was invited to his home for dinner. And here it says, I had my first direct experience with Moscow's much lamented, and I'm not sure if the word lamented is really proper here, but I wonder what you guys think. Please put in your comments. With much lamented communal living. Jorge and his wife lived with his mother and father, so 4 people, in a large partitioned room. 11 families shared the same kitchen and bathroom. In the kitchen, each family had its own hissing kerosene stove. Thus, an hour and a half before dinner, 11 women could be found bent over their stoves in a room filled with the aroma of borscht and cabbage soup. The Abramovich family woke up each morning at 4 o'clock a.m. in order to use the toilet before the line started forming at 5:30. They would go back to bed for another hour and a half of sleep. Smart people. Sounds like fun, right? 11 families sharing a single kitchen and 1 bathroom. Believe it or not, but living in a communal apartment like that was not the worst housing option that existed in the Soviet Union. Of course, some of my viewers will claim, hey, living on the street being homeless is way worse than anything else, and I agree, but remember, it was illegal to be homeless in the Soviet Union, so if anyone will end up on the street, they will be picked up by militia, by local police, and they will find you home. In my opinion, the worst option was what my family experienced for 5 years in living in these family dormitories. That's when you share a small room with another family. So in our case, we had 6 people sharing 1 room. So total strangers, 3 on my side and 3 the opposite side, had to share 1 room. And then we had to share a kitchen with the whole floor. And we didn't have anything like to take a shower. Those were in the basement. The second worst option, in my opinion, was living in barracks, baraki. So those were 1-story high or 2-story high wooden structures built mostly during Stalin era in 1930s, 1940s. People who lived there, they had their own room, but then they had to share a kitchen with the whole floor. They may had running water in the kitchen, only cold water, or could be no running water at all. They had to go walk towards the well, and there'll be no bathrooms. There'll be outhouses outside the building. Quite a lot of people in modern Russia still live in those barracks from 1930s. And number 3, the worst housing option in the Soviet Union was, as Robert Robertson put it, lamented communal apartments. Soviet communal apartments are nothing more than transformers. So that's a former rich people apartments that were transformed into the poor people communal apartments. One way of turning rich man apartment into the communal apartment was so-called packing. So you just force owners to accept more families, and then if you have 8 rooms or 11 rooms in this Robert Robertson story, then there'll be additional 10 families moving in, and you're just going to occupy a single room instead of 11. This process of packing was shown really well in the movie Собачье сердце, A Heart of a Dog, where a famous doctor living in St. Petersburg, later Leningrad, was constantly harassed by the local housing committee because they were trying to pack his 6-room apartment and bring more families in. But every time the doctor would call some party apparatchiks and will tell him like, hey, I have to cancel our appointment because now I'm losing my room where I take a look at my patients. And that apparatchiks will talk to the committee member and tell them like, don't you dare, and that was really funny to watch. So your average communal apartment would be located in some older buildings that were built downtown Kiev, Moscow, Leningrad. So buildings that were erected in 1800s, early 1900s. They were known for having tall ceilings, large rooms, really large wide hallway, which pretty much was perfect to create a communal apartment, except bathrooms were tiny and kitchens were semi okay. It's hard to believe, but even now, 100 years after 1920s, when those communal apartments were created, quite a few people still live in communal apartments. For example, in modern days St. Petersburg, former Leningrad, there are over 60,000 communal apartments times 5 to 10 families per apartment, around 80,000 communal apartments still in Moscow, capital of Russian Federation. I couldn't locate how many communal apartments still in Kiev. I know there are some, but in early 1990s, 25% of all housing options in Kiev were communal apartments. So huge number. So I'll guess at least 10 to 20,000 communal apartments in Kiev. So if you walk into some older building downtown Kiev or Moscow, it's easy to see if the apartment in front of you is communal or individual, because communal apartments have a bunch of doorbells. So each room will have its individual doorbell, and you just need to see what is the last name of person you're looking for, and there'll be one general doorbell that will just ring in the hallway. So that's like someone needs to open the door because maybe militia is there. And I don't know if you noticed, but Robert Robinson is mentioning that his friend's family lived in a single large partitioned room, which means they put like a cubicle partitions in their own room, so parents have a little privacy and a young couple has a little privacy. So that means that 11 family apartment could have more than 11 families. And another interesting detail, so this story relates to late 50s, early 1960s. So Soviet Union already sent satellite into space. They sent Gagarin into space. And guess what people do for cooking? Each family had its own hissing kerosene stove. So they even didn't have electric or like natural gas stove. People were cooking using kerosene stoves. Those kerosene stoves were called keragaz in Soviet Union, and I looked it up. Even in modern day Russia, they still manufacture those kerosene stoves, keragazy. But that's the beauty of centrally planned socialist economy. If the government cares about sending people to space, we'll send a person to space. But if government doesn't care about your living condition or how you cook your food, you'll be living in a communal apartment and cooking with keragaz. Okay, my friends, it's all I have for you today. And as a small nagruzka, remember a nagruzka, add-on item, I will add another video about Soviet housing that I recorded a couple of years ago. Enjoy the show, and we'll talk to you soon. До свидания. Goodbye. Comrades, how's it going over there? This is Sergey. Welcome back to Ushanka Show. My special thanks и огромное спасибо to all my supporters on patreon.com. Thank you, comrades. It's greatly appreciated. So today we're going to talk some more about Soviet free housing. I had quite an interesting comrade join the conversation, and I would like to respond to his comment. If you follow Ushanka Show for a while, you may know by now that Comrade Sergey finds himself quite often between the hard place and the extremely heavy sledgehammer. I mean, here we go, we have people like this Comrade Palatino that thinks that this guy gives me cringes. He's pathetic Soviet romanticizer and pseudo-commie. And on the other hand, we have people like Juan Zapata, who said that you are a ёбаный agent. All your pictures are говно. Your arguments too. Look, inequality in USA. USSR was a young country, developing. You would be better than China is today. I don't know why me should be better than China. You are anti-communist. Just accept it, brother. And blah blah blah, and this and that. Hypocritical scumbag. Well, are we having fun yet? So as I mentioned earlier, we're going to talk today about free housing, and we're going to answer one of the comments that came up in my previous video about free housing in the Soviet Union.
On a serious note, it's fairly hilarious how despite how hard you try to slander the USSR, you can still show us glimpses of exactly what we want and help us compare capitalist life disfavorably to socialist life. Your recent episode on housing was a perfect example. You know what's more depressing and inhumane than small apartments and shabby rural construction? Homelessness.
It's a very good comment, good points, and I actually had to look it up. A word slander, because I wasn't sure what was he talking about. I thought maybe he was talking about my slender, sexy body. But no, unfortunately it was a different slender word. So during our back and forth conversation, which was actually quite civilized, Comrade Good announced that he was evicted by a family, and then he was living out his car, and it was incredibly difficult to find for him a place to rest before work. I'm not Dr. Phil, but I'm just wondering, what could you do to get your family so pissed that they'll kick you out of the house? And he was trying to explain me how hard it is to live out of the car and you can't really take a shower and look decent for your job. And the funny thing, well, if you read my book, American Diaries, you would know that I was pretty much homeless too. And it's not only in 1995 when I lived on the loft in the market, freezing my butt and taking showers outside on the wet grass at night. I did that in 96, in 97, and in 1998. So total amount of, if we add all the months together, that'll be easy, at least 6 months that I was pretty much homeless. As I said, there was the market. So during the day I work in the market, and at night I climb on the roof, not the roof, on the loft. And I had this made out of carton boxes, little, like a doghouse. So it'd be warmer, and that's where I slept on the mattress. And that's in the fall in Michigan. But it's actually not a topic of today's video, and so I want to kind of run a couple of scenarios for Comrade Goods in response to his comment that he says that my recent episode on housing was a perfect example. And you know what can be worse than depressing and inhumane small apartments or shabby rural construction? Homelessness. So let's take a look at different scenarios how a homeless person in the Soviet Union could get a free apartment. So first scenario, let's say during the Stalin era, you just go to the local NKVD office and you report that you had argument with your family, and you told them that you think that Comrade Stalin is the best leader, and your parents answered that they think Trotsky will do way better running Soviet Union. And NKVD would arrest your parents, send them to Siberia, and guess what? You're not homeless anymore. You can occupy their apartment. The only problem with such scenario, if your neighbors later find out that you're a child of the enemies of the people, we actually had terminology like that. They can write a report on you. You'll get arrested too and sent to Siberia. But still, you'll be having a roof above your head. You won't be homeless, working in Gulag, mining for gold or diamonds. And of course, the second scenario for Stalin era is that you got kicked out for your anti-Soviet propaganda. Your parents got scared for your town, kicked you out, you're homeless, and KVD will pick you up and ship you to Siberia. You're not homeless. But, let's use more realistic scenario. So scenario number 3, we're talking, maybe 80s. You got kicked out of your parents' apartment, and you go to your place of work, for example, or some local office, and you apply to get a free apartment because you're homeless now. So in this case, you would be told to fill up the paperwork. Of course, there's a lot of paperwork. And so there's a special paperwork, like a request to improve your living conditions. And the part of it, they will say, wait, did you say your parents have an apartment? And he says, yes, but I got kicked out. Well, it doesn't matter. they're gonna calculate how many square meters per person in that apartment, including you. And if it's more than 6 square meters, you're not qualified to get your own apartment, because according to the Soviet standards, you got plenty of room in your parents' apartments. And Soviet bureaucrats don't care if you get kicked out, because you have plenty of room in that apartment. So you just need to go back to your parents and apologize and try to move back in. But let's continue working through our scenarios. So, for example, you're going back to your parents and you're trying to say you're sorry, and they still don't let you move in. So now you're homeless, right? Well, guess what? If you get caught twice, so you got 2 warnings, on the 3rd time, you can get arrested and go to jail for 2 years for systematic, and there's the Russian word, бродяжничество. So you're just wandering around, being homeless, no specific place where you live. It's a crime, and once again, you won't be homeless because you'll be arrested and sent to jail for 2 years. So that's your another scenario of getting free housing in the Soviet Union. But let's keep on moving. Let's explore more Soviet options. So let's picture, for example, that for real your parents had a little tiny apartment, or maybe a communal apartment, or a dormitory room that they shared with other families. So you are qualified to get a free apartment, to get an improvement in your living conditions. But guess what? You think it would be like 5, 6 different apartments options to choose from? Of course not. There'll be a waiting list. Maybe like my parents, they had to wait 20 years to get a 2-room apartment for family of 3. So in your case, I don't know how many years there'll be waiting list. And guess what? Meanwhile, you need to find some kind of housing. Otherwise, you'll get arrested and sent to jail for 2 years for not having a housing, for living on the streets. So as you see, Soviet free housing, even if it was available, it wasn't freely available. It was a desperate need, desperate shortage. I mentioned already in one of my stories that we end up going into the huge debt, pretty much getting Soviet mortgage, because my mom like, okay, we wait 20 years being on waiting list to get a 2-room apartment, or we just bite the bullet and get this кооперативная квартира, cooperative apartment, which costs tons of money, like was 15,000 rubles, but we'll get it in a year or 2. So situation was pretty bad, and I know it sounds great, free housing, but it wasn't that free. And if you follow my channel, I was sharing the story. So first my family lived in a dormitory, sharing a small room with another family. So total of 6 people, 2 families, like total strangers living together. I think we lived there for like 5 years. And my mom was so desperate. So according to her story, she went, she filled the paperwork asking for improvement in living conditions. And she said she begged and cried in the office of the person who was in charge of, doling out apartments. And, now I'm a grown man and I'm more cynical. I never questioned, like, is all she had to do just to cry? Or did she have to do anything else to please that bureaucrat, so he will just decide to give us an apartment? I mean, are you willing to do some sexual favors in order to move off the streets and get a little apartment? I don't know. And also, when I shared the story about my uncle and his struggles in Kiev, they literally had to become squatters. They just occupied some random room in the basement and made it live-in quarters for a while until they get kicked out on the street. And he sent a letter to Moscow with pictures that he's an artist and being on the streets. So free housing in the Soviet Union, it's a quite interesting topic. It's not that pretty as wasn't that pretty as many people think. Well, that's all I have to say for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'll talk to you soon. До свидания. Goodbye.